Good evening or afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another tropical forecast on now tropical storm Zeta, as it has weakened quite significantly because of the slow movement over the Yucatan Peninsula, but it did make landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula last night, and it is now at 65 miles an hour, but expected to gain strength back in the Gulf before it makes landfall for eastern Louisiana. Hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings have been issued for the Gulf Coast, stretching from Louisiana up to the Florida Panhandle. And tropical storm watches have been issued all the way up into the Georgia border with Tennessee. So I'm actually under tropical storm watch right now. It's actually only been in effect for about an hour, but it's weird to think that I'm under a tropical storm watch in late October, and I have a race tomorrow. So I'm going to be racing when we're under a tropical storm watch. It's very interesting here. Going to not only be seeing effects for the Gulf Coast, but going to be seeing widespread inland flooding and some strong gusts for portions of the southeastern area all the way up into South Carolina, Tennessee. So we can expect some widespread power outages, but expect to make landfall as an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane tomorrow night here into early tomorrow morning. Really that time frame where it's going to be an overnight storm. But before we get into the video, please subscribe if you're new, hit the like button, and the notification icon. But without further ado, let's get into this video. So here's now at the National Hurricane Center. We got Zeta there at 65 miles an hour, but pressure is continuing to drop. It is at 984 millibars. So being at 65 mile an hour tropical storm for 984 millibars, that is very impressive. But as it is going to be gaining its speed back, now going northwest at 14 miles an hour, it should start to regain strength in the remaining warm waters it has before it does interact with those cold waters off the Gulf Coast there. We already know 24, 25, 26 degrees Celsius there. But there it is, Zeta at 984 millibars, 65 miles an hour, 55 knots, and moving at northwest at 14 miles an hour. Here's a look now at the National Weather Service, and now you do see there we got widespread alerts there. We got flash flood watches in effect all the way up from the Louisiana coast to northern Georgia. Let's go start off with the Gulf Coast there. Obviously, there we got those storm surge warnings in effect for portions of all the Mississippi coast, including Gulfport. We do have storm surge warnings for much of eastern Louisiana, including New Orleans and the Grand Isle area. We do have hurricane warnings as well for New Orleans and portions of Gulfport. We obviously have those hurricane warnings there as well for the general areas in eastern Louisiana that are in the track of the storm. And we do got then we got tropical storm watches for the central coast of Louisiana there. Let's see if this can actually pop up here. The central coast there of Louisiana is also under some tropical storm watches. That's including Abbeville, Franklin, and Morgan City as well. Now moving on into the Florida area and the Pensacola area, we do have tropical storm warnings for Pensacola and the Fort Walton area and even Destin. We do have tropical storm warnings for Monroeville, Butte, Hattiesburg, Mobile, as well under a storm surge warning. Pensacola as well under a storm surge warning. That's because it's going to make land from the far eastern part of Louisiana, and that's going to leave the upper northeastern quadrant for these areas, which is where we see the worst storm surge and the heaviest of the rain there. So that's actually what we have it in really the National Weather Service. We also do have those tropical storm watches for all these areas in northern Georgia that are also in effect for a flash flood watch, like Grange, Atlanta, Gainesville, Blairsville, Dalton, Rome. You guys are all under those tropical storm watches as well. It's not too many times you see tropical storm watch in northern Georgia all the way up there near the Tennessee border in late October, days before November. So you guys are probably thinking this is going to be an eye right here. That most likely will not be an eye. I mean, it's just going to be like a little, since it is going through a phase right now and trying to regain strength and organization and structure, it's going to open up a few times where it looks like an eye. That's just it trying to grow. That's not really it strengthening to become a hurricane there. So that's not an eye. That's not an eye right there. Just before you guys go crazy in the comments, where it shouldn't be an eye. I would be surprised if it does become an eye, if it continues to be very visible on satellite imagery. But let's take a look at the banding though. I mean, this banding is really, really crazy. I mean, look at the inflow here. The inflow here is really just mental. This is a very large tropical storm. You can really see the nice banding there as well. You can really see the hook on there like that. That's where you get the inflow there. And you can really see that very, very nice outflow. I mean, that's some very defined outflow right there, and it's very large. You can just tell we got some really nice inflow there, and that's going to sharpen the outflow, which is actually now hooking around this whole tropical low. And there you can finally see that tropical low, that full low pressure system there at 984 millibars, which is now nearing or north of the Bay of Campeche there. It is now in the far southern Gulf of Mexico and heading for the areas of eastern Louisiana. There it is, heading for eastern Louisiana in that general vicinity there. But, I mean, it looks very, very good for a 65-mile-an-hour tropical storm that just made landfall in a pretty large area at a slow speed. I mean, it's just, the thing that's really getting to me is that outflow. I mean, the outflows, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. That's some very, very defined outflow. Excuse me, this is where the outflow will be. The outflow is right there. You get the nice inflow, and then that's where you get that beautiful banding there, very well defined. You can really see a lot of the vorticity there, that kind of clockwise spin, and that's what's going to give you that eye wall there. And the upper northeastern quadrant, which is typically the worst part of the storm, is this general area, which is why Mobile, Pensacola, and areas east, northeast of that landfall will get the worst of it, really wind-wise, and possibly even as well storm surge-wise, which we will be seeing later in the video after this. As you do see, there it is. We are still seeing some tropical storm winds felt for the Yucatan Peninsula, but it's going to be really diminishing off in the few hours there that we have left as it continues to speed up in the Gulf of Mexico, heading northwest. Soon going to start doing a northern turn and then moving east-northeast and then making landfall there. Gonna be making landfall just obviously, since New Orleans isn't really on the Atlantic coast necessarily. It's not gonna make a direct landfall in New Orleans, but it will go over New Orleans, almost directly over New Orleans. So it will impact Louisiana straight on, just won't be really a direct landfall because New Orleans really technically isn't like on that part of the coast where it's gonna hit, but it's gonna go right over area like New Orleans, especially as well Grand Isle. That's what we have there. As you do see, we have this hurricane warnings in the red. That's all the way from the the western Alabama coast, all the way up to the southeastern Louisiana coast, and expected to make landfall at around probably around maybe 10 p.m., 9 p.m. As it will speed up, obviously, significantly inland and become a post-tropical depression by the time we get to Virginia. So that's going to bring in around 20 to 30 miles an hour, even 35, just a sustained gust for areas all the way up in the mid-Atlantic, and it will be a full tropical low storm, or a full-on tropical low, 100% tropical storm. So not going to be post-tropical storm, not going to be extra tropical low. It's going to be full-on tropical. There we got those. This is the 4 p.m. Central Time, so this is actually an hour and 18 minutes old. But there you see all the way from the coast to northern Georgia, we got those tropical storm watches. And I am also in the tropical storm watches as well. It's very weird to think about that. But then you got the hurricane warnings there from New Orleans, Biloxi, Gulfport. And then you do have the areas like Abbeville. We do have Enterprise. We have Montgomery, Birmingham, Atlanta, Georgia under those tropical storm watches. And then we do have those warnings for Pensacola, Laurel, and Macomb areas of Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, Mobile, Pensacola, Destin. So the kind of been very active this general time of the year, this general season here, been very active. Obviously, we did have kind of the same situation in this general area for Marca before it just busted, just became a huge bust and died. And we got Sally as well that made landfall right here, or made landfall in the general area right here. Kind of same situation with where the storms and watches are right now. Except obviously the hurricane warnings are way more to the west. But just, you got what I mean. That general area has been very active this year. But storm surge all the way from Vermilion Bay, taken all the way up into the mouth of the Mississippi River, to the mouth of the Chattahoochee River near Pensacola, all the way up to Yankeetown, all the way up in the Big Bend. That's going to bring in some widespread storm surge. But the worst of the storm surge, like I did say, will be in the upper northeastern area of that low pressure. So northeast of that landfall. So it's going to make landfall around near Fortune. It's to make landfall near that Fortune area, whatever, how you pronounce it. That's kind of where it's going to make landfall. So the northeast of that is right here. That's exactly where we'll be seeing the worst of the storm surge. From the mouth of the Pearl River to the Dumpton Island in Alabama, we will be seeing 5 to 8 foot storm surge. So technically, we will be seeing unsurvivable storm surge for some areas, and that's going to be the max. That's max. It won't be unsurvivable storm surge from the minimum to the max. It's just going to be maximum will be unsurvivable for some areas, but it'll be very minimal since the chance of actually getting 8 foot storm surge is going to be kind of very low since it is that max, and it always could lower, and it could get higher just depending on how it interacts in the Gulf of Mexico. But very much of eastern Louisiana, the southern coast, there will be stick at really 1 to 4 foot storm surge, and then the eastern side, the southeastern part of the coast there near New Orleans, you guys can see possibly 2 to 4 foot storm surge. And then areas near the mouth of the Mississippi River, 4 to 6 foot storm surge. And then areas near the Mobile area and areas as well as the Alabama border with Florida, see 3 to 5 foot storm surge. And then even near Pensacola, 2 to 4 foot storm surge. So it could be quite significant for Pensacola. And then for much of the Panhandle to the Big Bend in Florida, we are sticking at 1 to 3 foot storm surge. Like I mentioned with that upper northeastern quadrant, we saw how the northeastern quadrant will see the worst of that storm surge, and they will see the worst of the winds. Mobile, for example, they are not getting near that landfall, but they are northeast of that landfall, and that's exactly where they will be seeing the worst winds that are on Wednesday, tomorrow at 9 p.m., 60 to 75 mile an hour wind gusts. That's wind gusts, not sustained. This is wind gusts, 60 to 75. That's the highest so far. Gulfport, northeast of that landfall, at 9 p.m. the same time, 50 to 60 mile an hour gusts. Baton Rouge, just miles away from the landfall, that same time, 20 to 25 mile an hour. That's gusts, not sustained. New Orleans, basically getting the landfall. It's going to get basically the direct landfall. Basically, miles away from that low pressure, that same time, 40 to 50 mile an hour. So areas that are a few hundred miles away from that landfall will be getting the worst winds, including Gulfport and Mobile. That's just an example. That's just many of the many examples we had to show the areas north of that low pressure will get the worst of it. As you see there, we haven't making landfall for eastern Louisiana. They're a few minutes away from New Orleans, probably a good 30 minutes, maybe hour, depending on traffic. Obviously, I don't know Louisiana traffic. A good probably 30, 40 miles southeast of Louisiana or of New Orleans, we can see that landfall. And then I take a sharp northeastern turn that's going to go straight over my house. Actually, a lot of these models are going right over my house. A lot of them. A few. The orange, the green, the red, and the purple are all kind of like in between my house there. So definitely seen that this low pressure is going to go almost right over my area. So that's going to bring some pretty big impacts there. So let's take a look at the new GFS that the new 18Z has just started reloading. They get us now to 973 millibars in 18 hours. That's actually quite impressive. And then they get the landfall at 971 millibars. That is worth, ladies. That is actually worth more than a Category 1. That's actually worth Category 2 winds. Or that's worth Category 2 central pressure. And then you have that low pressure obviously going pretty far inland there. Let's check out the winds. If we shall check out the winds, 10 meter. As you do see, it is supporting quite a big storm there. I mean, that is well over Category 1 winds. It's actually supporting around 80 knots there. That's obviously 90 miles just over 90 miles an hour, which is getting to that Category 2 category winds. So definitely watching the GFS. GFS has been on a little trend for the past 48 hours on a huge strength spree, basically. CMC, I don't know what they're doing. I don't even know why I'm showing the CMC. They have 998 millibar landfall. I don't even know what to say, but that's pretty embarrassing. Icon getting it more reasonable at a 978 millibar landfall. And then going up into northern Georgia, that's going to bring in quite the heavy rain for portions up in the northeast and tri-state area. So this is going to be looked at now at the 10-meter wind speed knots. This is 10-meter wind speed knots. So this is actually in knots. I repeat, it's in 10 meters. So this is basically on the ground. This is what you see on the surface. The next 24 hours, it starts to have around 30 to 40 knots arriving on the far southern coast of Louisiana. Let's get to the 27-hour time frame. That's when that landfall occurs. 27 hours right in this general area right here. And then that's where kind of New Orleans is. So it's going to go straight over the city, basically. They have it at 86 knots, which is around 97 miles an hour. I think, again, this is 10 meters. So this is getting to a 97-mile-an-hour landfall. Like I did say, there it is. That northeastern quadrant is going to be the worst of it. You're going to see that counterclockwise spin. That's going to make that worst storm surge for the area of the northeast of where that actually makes landfall. So it's going to bring in the onshore breeze, which is also going to help bring in storm surge for these areas to the west. So this just kind of this is the general spin's going to help cause that widespreadness of the water. I do see in the next 30 hours we'll be moving pretty far inland, going to bring in those strong winds out there up to up to 70 knots there for portions of Mississippi and Alabama. Let's go and check out now areas in general in the southeast here. Let's go check out now. Let's see if the Georgia map actually shows Alabama. Yep, Georgia's going to show Alabama. Alright, I'm actually glad the Georgia map's still pretty far out. So this is what the Georgia map's showing here. So it is going to bring in this general area around 34 knots for my area, 34 knots for the northern metro Atlanta area. Going to bring in around 40 knots for portions of northeastern Alabama. And it's going to bring quite the breezy winds there for portions of the northeast and mid-Atlantic coast. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and bye guys.